Ladies and gentlemen, we're live. I didn't even realize it for a second. How's everybody doing tonight? Today. I mean, Srivis, goodness gracious, it's 6 a.m. by him. He's out there doing his thing, though. He's on his grind. He's dedicated to the cause of spreading craft beer information. He's getting ready to brew up a West Coast IPA. Yeah, boy. The West Coast IPA that we did at Sonder is pouring right now, and it's doing well. It's called Beer Garden. It's a pale boy, bitter crisp, smelling like a good strata. And yeah, chat. Let me know if I'm sounding all right tonight. Maybe not looking all right. That's nothing I can control. But sounding, let me know. Sriva says we're sounding good. So let's get down to brass tacks here, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Adam Makes Beer podcast and YouTube channel. My name's Adam. Check out Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and see all of the long-form brewer interviews that we've done. After you subscribe, please leave a review and comment as well, because it really helps support the work I am doing. Also, if you are new to the channel or podcast, go to Adam Makes Beer on YouTube, click the playlist tab, and see tons of info, brew days, techniques, tutorials, now over 735 videos. As always, if you're getting value out of this content, please follow, rate, like, comment, and share with your brewing friends and craft beer enthusiast homies. And if you have the means and feel as if my content has benefited you, consider a channel membership for $2.99 a month. This gives you priority for questions, to get your questions answered, and during the Q&A live streams and quarterly merch drawings. Or drop a super chat tip in the comments or chat. I just had a great time recently talking to Jessie Smith of she is the principal scientist of Queen City Quality Labs. It was a good time. If you've not checked that last podcast out, get in there and check it out. Jessie is a delight. We had a fun conversation. Some good stuff going on there, so you won't want to miss that one. This month, though, I'm a little up in the air as far as scheduling. I'm not gonna lie, this month is a little bit crazy. All right, let me do some mic adjustments here. This month is a little bit crazy for me. I've got something going every weekend. I've got kids graduating, kids wrapping up, missionary terms, and I'm going to pick them up and bring them home. And then my wife and I are going away for Memorial Day weekend. Is that Memorial Day weekend? End of the month, whatever it is, that holiday. She and I are going away for a few days together, so that'll be nice. We're doing the barn dominium thing somewhere in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, and the thing has a pool table and a dartboard, and we're gonna have a good time. So that'll be fun. We're gonna do some hiking, check out the scenes a little bit. But yeah, this is gonna be a very busy month. So the industry pro interview is still a little bit TBD right now. I either have to reschedule or find a new interview spot. But anyway, stay tuned. Good reason to mention to follow me on Instagram or Facebook. I'm being more active on Facebook right now. My overall social media posts have been a little bit lower lately, just because I'm trying to be a little bit more balanced and a little bit more focused on family life and everything like that. So but if you're a Facebook person, over Instagram, follow Adam Mills on Facebook, and you'll be able to get my stuff. Maybe even Adam Makes Beer, I'm not sure. But anyways, there's that. So follow me on there to see all the updates when I take calls for questions, announce interviews. So yeah, do that. That's a good thing. What else? Speaking of good things, let's talk about our friends at Blickman Engineering. Blickman Engineering has been the pioneer of nano brewing, and they have helped hundreds of successful breweries achieve their dreams since they started with one-barrel systems in 2006. Now offering a full suite of brew houses up to 15-barrel skidded and insulated, matching cellaring equipment, keg washers, grain mills, and more size specifically for the nano brewer. Blickman Pro brewing systems are competitively priced without sacrificing quality. And the simple design and factory direct support from our brewing experts gets you up and running faster than anything else on the market. When you're ready to go pro or just kicking the tires, be sure to reach out to them for expert advice and a partner to help you through it all. Turn your dreams into a reality by reaching out to Phil, Tom, or Josh at ProSeries@BlickmanEngineering.com. Again, that's ProSeries@BlickmanEngineering.com. Blickman Engineering Pro Brewing is proud to be the equipment sponsor for this channel and is committed to helping every brewer, no matter where they are in their journey. All right, we're rocking and rolling, people. Like I said a little bit during the show, ramp up. Things have been busy. Things are good. Things have been busy. We're ramping up at work, getting folks trained up on that side, filling out staff on the brewing side. I just bumped my pop guard with my nose, so that's been good. Ramping up there. How about the May Career Corner? Ladies and gentlemen, I decided to take some of my own advice. If you've watched any of the material that I've been doing on leadership development, developing your job into a career, one of the things that I say is that you need to create time for education on your own. Okay. Professional development just shouldn't be your brewery sending you to a conference where you may or may not get completely polluted while you're there. No judgment, just saying. I think I've been saying, there's tons of good podcasts. Get out there and start listening. And so this month I dug in, and it's actually going to lead to a little bit of change in the show. Just so you know, I don't have tons of questions in. I don't have tons of questions preloaded here, but I do have some like discussion topics of things that I've been learning based on the podcasts that I've been listening to. Sometimes they're bigger concepts, sometimes they're smaller. So yeah, from my personal career standpoint, I've decided to step up and start doing a better job of using that commute. So those of you who may not know, I am a huge fantasy football nerd. And in particular, what I love about it is I love getting into a lot of very dense analytical projection stuff for predicting what players will rack up what amount of statistics on the field. And the interesting thing is, like, the content that I listen to, it's like legitimate gambling like content. The funny thing is I don't gamble. Like, I think when I play fantasy football, I'm in a few leagues, and I don't know if I spend more than $50 between the few leagues. But I follow it like 12 months out of the year, like a junkie. But I've been using some of my commute time. Usually I'll fill things in there. I do different podcasts and whatnot. And I've been trying to carve out 2 to 3, maybe 4 times a week. Not both ways, sometimes just one way. But diving into some podcasts. In particular, I've been listening a lot to the Beer and Brewing podcast, and they have some really good interviews on there with some really interesting brewers. And if you don't do it, I personally can listen to that podcast at 1.2 speed, which might not sound like a lot, but if you are like trying to just devour information, it definitely helps. Get wild and try 1.5, baby. You know what I mean? See what works for you. But I do encourage you, because it's been paying off for me. It's been getting my gears turning a little bit. And in particular, I've been brainstorming some British ale concepts. I work in a production facility, and so we have our production calendar and our seasonals already kind of set up, and so there's not a ton of opportunity for smaller batch stuff. Even though I'm super grateful for the opportunity to have done a couple of smaller batch beers. If you've been looking at getting some of the Dunkel that we made, I believe the draft of that is all gone. There might be some cans that moved pretty quick. And like I mentioned before, we do have that West Coast IPA that was kind of inspired by that interview that I had with Julian Schrago, Austin and I, lead brewer at Sonder. Really enjoyed that interview, and we put our heads together on that Beer Garden West Coast IPA recipe, and so that came out good. But I've been thinking a lot about British beers because somebody asked me maybe a month or two ago on here, and they're asking about cask ale and why nobody seems to care about cask ale. And I don't know if I didn't have a ton of time. Maybe I did have time to prepare for it, and this is just kind of off the top. I was like, if you're really passionate about something, you need to find a way to educate people, your staff, and so you can get other people excited about it. And I was listening to a beer and brewing interview just recently. I don't remember which one it was. They're talking a lot about smoked beer, and they were talking about how they have multiple smoked beers on year round. It wasn't Live Oak, but it could have been. And they're passionate about it, and they're passionate about getting it in front of people. And they say probably 50% of the people that try those beers end up liking them, when you might think a smaller percentage would like them. So a lot of times it can come down to stuff like that. So I was encouraging the person that was asking about cask ale to, figure out why you're passionate about it, what's special about it, and then be able to communicate that to the public. And so I started thinking about it because British beers are not expensive beers to make. They don't require tons and tons of hops. But I started riffing on a drive one day. I started riffing on so what are some English type hybrid beers that I could make, some traditional English beers that I can make, or where it would present as a traditional version, but use different techniques and different ingredients in there. So I'm thinking on some stuff, and it's been really good to get my kind of creative juices going. I did an interview with Chris Lewingston. If you have not checked out the Modern Brewer podcast, you need to. Has a lot of great guests on there, a lot of interesting stuff, and I need to hook him up. He's a UK brewer, or former brewer in the UK, and I want him to point me in the direction of somebody that is still making a smaller scale brewer that's still making traditional-ish British beer. If you're a traditional pub brewer out there doing the UK thing in the UK, I would love to pick your brain on some of that stuff. So anyways, I there's no plans for it or anything like that, but it's fun mental exercises. You know what I mean? So anyways, I had to take a little of my own medicine this month, and I don't know, just get out there, listen to new stuff, learn new stuff. It's going to benefit this podcast today because some of the stuff that we discussed today is going to come directly from that. I don't know if I'm going to segment them up differently or not, because in some ways it's almost like I'm doing a promo for another podcast or for another brewery or their brewery. So, but anyways, that's kind of that. And I think that is it for today's Make Career Corner. Actually, one more thing. I want to say this. One thing that talking about the leadership thing, I am a very expressive guy, and sometimes I want to let people know how hard I'm working, or how much I want something to work. That's the right phrase. How much I want something to work. And sometimes I apologize when I don't need to. And there's nothing wrong with, apologizing when appropriate, but sometimes I over apologize. It's not sometimes, it's actually probably a fault of mine, and I'm sorry for that. Irony. But one of the things that I want to focus on as a leader is sometimes I can do a better job at when you hit a rough patch or something unexpected happens in the workplace. I have to remind myself that I need to walk in the same way every day, whether there's something on my mind or not, because I think it's really important to show the people that you work with, whether it's management or coworker, that if something unexpected happens, you can recognize it as a speed bump, but you know that you're going to get through it, and you just work through it confidently, right? That's something that I want to work on a little bit more. And I think it's a good one to keep in mind. It kind of goes along with consistency. But yeah, just a good reminder. And that is the end of your May Career Corner. Bro, I just muted myself to cough, just so you know. That's how professional I am. We got Strivas Nunez in the chat. We got Coco Rico in the chat. Coco Rico, dude. Coco Rico 18. Coco Rico, I don't know if I've seen you in there before. Is this your are you a first time, long time Coco Rico? Even if you're his first time, welcome. Welcome, fellow person. Coco Rico 18. All right, I'm just gonna first question. I might say first question a couple times, but a question from the chat from Coco Rico 18. Hi, Adam. Just curious about how do you deal with dropped objects on the brewery floor, like tri-clamps and gaskets, in terms of preparation process before getting them back in use? And Coco Rico has said that it is his first time. Well, welcome, Coco Rico. I like saying it. I think in general, you know, I've had a situation where, definitely if you're talking about if you drop a gasket on the floor, you're getting ready to make a connection from one tank to another for a transfer, this, that, or anything, any transfer that you want to be clean. If you're dropping a gasket on the floor, I think it stays there and you get another new one that's clean and sanded. And then you hit it with ISO, alcohol, iodine, whatever you use to sanitize, and then you make your connection. Okay. Just because that's too close, too present. Sometimes I will, if I drop a triclover, I will grab a different one that's clean, but a triclover is something I'm more likely to pick up and use. Sometimes I might spray it again or whatever, but usually I just grab a new clamp as well. And I work very hard to try not to drop them either. I'll generally keep them in one of the chemical buckets, which is around me, whether that be a sanitizer bucket or a foaming acid that we use in the brewery to clean the port prior to hitting it with alcohol. I'll do that. You know, one time I had a period of time where I was working with a person and they were getting ready to make a transfer. And so they're hunched up over there and they have their gasket out of sanitizer and they're spraying the ports or whatever, and they're getting ready to make their connection, and they dropped the gasket, and then they looked over at me. I just happened to see it happen at the time. My guess is if I wasn't looking, they just would have picked it up and used it, even though they knew that that wasn't what I preferred. So, you know, it's just one of those things. It's a pain in the butt, but yeah, get up and get another one. If you can clean it again or something like that, that's fine. But in general, if stuff's hitting the floor, I usually, especially softs that I'm going to be making connections with, stuff like that. If I'm building out a tank or whatever, I put those things into a bucket and then I bring those things over to the tank. I usually don't like laying parts for a tank on the floor, things like that, unless it's a dirty build. Like, so sometimes I'll I'll be breaking down a bright tank, and I'll take the racking arm out, and that's dirty, and I'll lay it on the floor and spray it out. That racking arm can be kind of unwieldy for the what's it called? What was I going to call it? For the bucket that I put dirty parts in. But yeah, Coco Rico, that's my take on it. And yeah, appreciate the question and welcome. First time, long time, or just first time? I'll take first time, man. Welcome. Coco Rico, I'd be interested. Tell me in the chat if you found out how you found the YouTube channel. I would love to know. So anyways, man, we wrapped up Career Corner. We've got our first question from a new listener, Coco Rico. Baby, we got a stew going. Next question is from Philip on YouTube. Great vid. Thank you. Quick question. Why do you need a carb stone? Isn't pressure fermentation in the unitank not sufficient to carbonate? Thanks. Philip, excellent question. So yes, you can get complete and full carbonation by utilizing spunding or bunging on the unitank side, fermenter side. Okay. There are some situations though where you will not get all the gas that you need for something. So let's say, for instance, there is an ale that you are finishing out at 72F. Okay, so kind of like just traditional ale yeast, not like, don't think Saison or Belgian or something like that. Kind of the higher end of the fermentation temperature scale for an ale yeast like that. Once you get up there, 15 psi is only going to, or roughly 1 bar. That's what most tanks are rated for. At a temperature like that, you're only going to get so much pressure into, or so much carbonation into that beer. And so what we'll find is after we, bung that, we have the pressure on it and bring the temperature down, we don't have full carbonation in that beer. Now you could continue to add head pressure to that beer or put that beer on head pressure to get the rest of your carbonation in it and then make the transfer. But one of the things you might not realize is a lot of craft brewers that I've spoken to, a lot of U.S. craft brewers are not bunging or spunding their beers in the FV for a number of reasons. I can see how it would be tricky sometimes, especially with big fat dry hops for a lot of New England style beers that are being made now. You don't necessarily want to be holding a whole bunch of carbonation and things like that. But yeah, it's not a practice that is universal with the folks that I talk to. So yeah. So the reason is so that means at some point, and even if you do have, so even say you have, the 2.65 volumes of CO2 into your beer when you're transferring it to your bright tank, serving tank, packaging tank, what have you. You might lose some carbonation in the transfer if you go too quickly. So the purpose of that carbonation stone in the bright tank is to more effectively inject CO2 into solution. Once you got your beer into your bright tank, serving tank, you could just put head pressure on it and wait for it to come up. Or you could inject through this carb stone, which is going to be injecting very tiny bubbles of CO2 into solution, and you're getting a lot more surface area of gas into that liquid, and it'll help that gas infuse into the liquid more readily. Okay, so that's kind of the purpose of the carb stone, is when you do not hit full carbonation, or you could not hit full carbonation on the warm side of your fermentation, then yeah, that's what you can use to polish that up and adjust that CO2 level. So appreciate the question, Philip. Hope that helps. Appreciate the feedback, Coco Rico. Welcome to the chat, man. Good to have you in there. We've got 2 questions in a row from Big Al. Hope you're ready for that. That reminds me of my dear friend. Shout out to the great and powerful Bill Allen. He was a coworker of mine for many years at a school I used to teach at, and man, I love that guy. Good man. We had a lot of fun times and a lot of difficult times at that school. There's a lot of people I miss from back there. So, anyways, it got me. I used to call him Big Al occasionally. So, anyways, guy, I was getting memory lane on podcast time. My apologies. So, Big Al on YouTube says, "Hey Adam, how do you check the pH of the water when you are rinsing your heat-X?" Big Al is referring to the tutorial video that I have on how to clean your heat exchanger, or how I clean my heat exchanger when I was working at Cartridge Brewing outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. Now the great Josh, big rig Josh, big Josh Halpert is over there doing it. I'm going to see him on Wednesday. He's going to bring me some beers, and we're gonna workshop it. You know what I mean? But that was a tutorial video that I made back when I was at Cartridge, and I was showing you my process for cleaning the heat exchanger. And one thing that I say in all those videos is that you want to rinse until pH neutral. Okay. And what I mean by that is until the pH of the rinse water coming out of whatever vessel you're cleaning matches your city water. Okay, whatever the water pH that you're rinsing with. The reason I say that is because I want to cover my butt. And I don't want to tell you, oh, rinse for 5 minutes doing this or 2 minutes doing this. So what you can do is, and I would recommend, so like say you're rinsing something like a heat exchanger, and so you're using the same water source to flush it. Okay, so that means that you would have the same volume of water going through it. All right. So you have that volume of water going through it. I would do that for 1 minute, shut that water source off, and harvest a little bit of water that's coming out of there, and get your pH meter in there and see if it still has evidence of either being acidic or basic based on whatever it is chemical that you're rinsing out, whether it's your caustic or your acid. Run it for another minute, test that water. And so that way it would be something that you'll have to periodically check, but you can come up with a rule of thumb for rinsing, right? And it's probably a good thing to be doing. Have a standardized water source that you're going to be rinsing something with. So whether it's your hot liquor tank, whether it's your city water supply, something like that. Have all inputs be constant on that side, and then time that rinse, because you don't want to be wasting time. You don't want to be wasting water, but you definitely want to get that chemical out of the equipment that you are cleaning. So, yeah, that's my take on it, Big Al. Appreciate the question, brother. And this is question number 2 from Big Al on YouTube. I wish you would have added what flavor effects these different types of hops would have on the beer. I'm really enjoying your videos. Thanks, Big Al. Al is capitalized, by the way. A-L, all caps, like the American League. You know? So Big Al is talking about a hop rub video that I did with big Josh Halpert when we were in our glory days, when the sun always shone upon our faces, when every path that we walked was covered, when there was just like a woodland cover, a woodland archway over every cobblestone path that we walked down, sun streaming through, birds. I was going to say like pleasant insects, but I find them all disgusting. And he and I would just walk and talk and make beer and just fraternal bond. But we did a hop rub. And from the good folks at Crosby Hop Farms, we took a host of hops that they gave us samples of, and then we did a rub. I'm no hop expert, but I did what I could. I got in there. I got a little bit of a backhanded compliment from an industry person about that video. Listen, I'm no expert on it. I wanted to show you like what I think about, what I try, different things like that. But so he was watching this hop rub video, and really we were talking about, just smelling the bag and then breaking those cones apart, looking at them, and then breaking them down for a rub in our hands and smelling, getting a good hit of that, then getting all the green matter out of our hands, and then noticing like how sticky, how high of an oil content there was in there. And then when we just had the oils in our hands, rubbing that up and smelling that, and then taking it from a distance and moving closer, deep sniffs, short sniffs, all the sniffs. Okay. And we're trying to figure out how that hop presents, right? The problem with a scenario like that is you never know how that hop is going to translate into the finished beer. So Big Al, it's a little bit of a disappointing question here. Although I will say this. So for me to rub those hops and tell you what you're going to get in your final beer is a little bit tricky. But I will tell you this. If you have access to beer that you want to dry hop, or you want to see how it would affect, at least on the dry hopping side, I'm a big fan of taking, I don't know, especially if you have a volume of beer, getting like a growler or howler or yowler or meowler, whatever various size glass container that you can purge and get your like a simple base beer in, and then get those pellets into it, different ones that you want to try, and try to do that in as low of an oxygen way as you can, and get that sealed up, turn it over a couple times, and then taste it over the course of a couple days. Now, yes, as you open it, it will oxidize a little bit. So if you want to test after 1 day or 2 days or 3 days, what have you. But that might give you a hint. But for me to tell you how those hops that I was rubbing at that time, from that hop farm, from that particular crop, from that row, there's a lot of variables in there, right? And so you're best off getting some hops, doing a rub on them, whether they're whole cone or breaking down the pellets, and checking them out like that, and then do some sort of little janky like side experiment where you dose up a beer, a relatively austere beer, Fred Austere, and see how that comes out in the aroma. Also knowing that those hops will express differently as a late kettle addition to a dry hop addition. Okay, so yeah. Appreciate you watching. I know it's not like the best answer, like kind of snap and fix it, but it'll put you on the right path, Big Al. I appreciate the question. Do you think Maggie was stewing jealously in the corner when Josh and I were taking those walks? Sridhar, to my knowledge, you have not met any of the three of us, but if it's almost as if you had, because if she knew Josh and I were taking that walk and she was not there, she would be stewing. As little hearts would like float up out of her ears. Oh, Maggie Pie. I haven't seen her in a minute, and I miss her too. I need to talk to her. Next question is from Old Crispy Boy on YouTube. Hey, Adam. How many days after the cool down do you leave your hops? Now, this is a question that is coming from the tutorial video that we did on cold dry hopping. So you can go back and check that video out. What I would recommend is is I would recommend you get used to tasting and sampling. I have a hunch that if you're looking for juicy, fruity type notes, that below 3 days and below might be your sweet spot. This is going to depend on whether or not you're circulating, rousing, letting them fall through naturally, different things like that. But the big key is you need to be tasting it every day. All right, because I think that there's a lot of anecdotal evidence to suggest that you can pull those juicy flavors, those fruit flavors that you want out of hops. And if you allow the hop matter to stay on that beer, that it can flip the script on you. And it can start pushing into some of the more alliaceous, some of the more onion garlic type components that hops can bring to the table. So yes, that's my take on that, old crispy boy. Old crispy boy. All of the necessary Y's have been replaced with I's, which is probably the way I have all those. I would spell all those words personally. Hey, just so you know, are you dying for some in-brewery content? I am. Good news. I have some in-brewery content that is dropping tomorrow. That is May 7th. Tomorrow, May 7th. In-brewery content dropping. And it is me doing in the lab, as if I were a 1990s rapper, taking cell count on fermenting beer. Okay, so that's one of the things that we track with our daily tank checks. So 365 days a year at Sonder, we do tank checks. And so we're checking temperature, the density of the beer, the pH of the beer, head pressure, all these various things, right? Including cell count up to a certain point. So I showed a pretty straightforward process on how we track that. And maybe there are maybe Jesse Smith from Queen City Quality Lab was just face palming as I did that. Okay. But I think it might be useful for some folks. So check that one out. That'll be dropping tomorrow. So you get to see this guy in the habitat again, rather than just in this zoo. Okay. In this unnatural enclosure that I'm in. Do you think this is where I naturally roam? Do you think I naturally have tin tackers over my shoulder? Do you think I have fake fire behind me everywhere I go? I go crazy in here. Every once in a while, somebody comes in and they bring me raw meat. Okay. But you get to see me in my natural habitat. Okay. In the brewery, in the lab. So let's get it. You'll watch it, you'll enjoy it, and we'll high five. All right. Chat's popping off. There's a new name in here. Is this unmusical? That's not a name I've seen before. Welcome, fellow brewer. Adam, thanks for all the community and all you did in the community and on YouTube. Oh, thank you, man. I'm going to read that again because it was so nice. Then they continue. I'm a home brewer, and when I can, I like to split batches to compare hops and yeast. Off the top of your head, if you were able to do a split batch, what would you compare? So I would do some, yeah, I mean, depending on if you have like good temperature control, I would do some subtle things like American ale yeast, the exact same pitches, one at 68, one at 72, held constant throughout fermentation, and then see what happens. Or I would do American ale yeast, British ale yeast, side by side them and see what it's like. Any yeast strain that you like working with, ferment at the lower end of the spectrum and at the higher end of the spectrum, temperature wise, right? Stuff like that. Try out different lager strains against each other. Do the whole ferment a Lutra, right? So the lager like Kveik strain against a traditional lager strain. I would mix it up like that. The cool thing about keeping something similar is if you're not, I mean, you can probably blend those beers back into one if you really wanted to. I don't know what purpose that would serve, but anyways, you could if you needed extra, if you want extra keg space or whatever. But manipulate some of those variables with individual things. Sure, you can do different dry hops. I think that's great. Do some with dry hopping at different lengths as well. So take your favorite hop at the equivalent of 2 pounds per barrel. I know you said you're on the homebrew side, but 2 pounds per barrel is a pretty normal IPA type dry hop. You can go higher or lower, but scale that down and do 2 pounds per barrel equivalent in one, and do a 1/2 pound per barrel in the other, and see what you like. I think that stuff can be instructive. So mix up your variables. Try to just test one thing at a time, and that's the way I would approach it. And then give all the beer you can to your friends so you can keep brewing. So if you have the money for a lot of ingredients, get after it, man. It really helps you turn and burn, right? Hopefully you're sharing the beer with your friends as opposed to necessarily doing all those batches yourself. And welcome Unmusical. That's it's good to see you in the chat. We got Corey Wayne in here. Corey Wayne, I'm here. I haven't had a stuck sparge in the last month since our conversation. Attaboy. Love to hear it. Ladder tons are not fun. Mash on ladder tons are not fun. They can be a serious pain in the rear. Corey, off the top of your head, do you feel as if you were able to figure out what exactly the variable was? If you did toss it in the chat, if you already told me, I apologize. I've got a lot of messages floating around in my head. Yes, stuck to the CIP arm in an FV like a koala chewing on some hot pellets. Indeed, baby. Junction Point Brewing in the house. Great information per usual, Adam. Cheers. Junction Point. Are you homebrew side or pro side? Give me a holler, man. Let me know. Yeah, Unmusical. That's the key. You give away more so you can brew more. Yeah. Helps you stay on the straight and narrow a little bit when you got some folks you can pawn some beer off on. But yeah. So this is going to be another international question. Technology is interesting, man. I got this question. This question actually came in Vietnamese or whatever the dialect is. And so, I was able to throw it through Google Translate, and it's crazy. Oh, Corey, you are milling too fine, and it was making more of a gelatinous texture. Rad, man. I'm really glad we I remember that now. I'm glad we got to the bottom of it. Junction Point homebrewing. Love it, man. Love it. Next question, and all due respect again when I'm pronouncing some international names, I can struggle with pronunciation. So with all due respect, this question comes from Phuong Tran on YouTube. Hello, Adam. When I saw the video you shared about beer, I was very happy. I myself am new to the industry, like a toddler. I had a lot of difficulty in counting the yeast at the stage of mixing the water and methylene blue to get that ratio appropriate. I watched the remaining steps in the video that you made, and I know that you should mix sample water with a ratio of 250 grams of water in a 5-gram sample. But the above sample takes 1 mil sample and 9 mils of water from the previous sample, and takes 2 mil sample and another 2 mil sample. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, he wants to know what is the methylene blue to water ratio that I'm using. And he also forgot to mention that he is from Vietnam. And so if there's any problem in translation, we can blame Google Translate. But yeah, so actually this will be a great time to look at this. We just mentioned I have that new tutorial video that's posting, and by the time this maybe by the time you're listening to the podcast, or you see this shorter video that'll be clipped for YouTube, you can go back and find it'll be under the tutorial tab. But what you want to do is you want to make a 0.01% solution of methylene blue, and you want to you want that to dye your yeast sample, and you want to let that sit for about 1 to 5 minutes once you get that stain on there. Okay, you need to give it some time to interact, or the yeast cells to interact with that dye. And just for a little background, the reason that we want to stain those cells is that the viable cells will remain clear due to the fact that they have the ability to reduce or break down that dye that coats them, and then they'll show up just as a normal little gray yeast cell rather than blue. It's the dead cells that will get covered, and obviously, since they're dead, not have the ability to break that down and to appear clear in the sample. Non-viable cells stain blue due to the loss of membrane integrity and reduced physiological activity. Budding cells stained blue or light blue should still be counted as viable. So remember that when we are talking about yeast reproduction, like 99% of the time we're talking, and maybe even higher, we're talking about asexual reproduction, where you have a yeast cell and then another little tiny one, and boop, boop, pop, and they have 2 different cells. That was science. Yeah, that's how that works. You can also get into when they'll drop spores and stuff like that, and that's how they're making some interesting hybrids now, but that's a conversation for another day. So when you are going in and doing your counting, if the budding cell is at least half the size of the larger cell, the parent cell, you can count that. All right. And sometimes it will, sometimes that cell will stain, and so it'll look like it's dead. But if it's still attached to a living cell, you can count it as good. Again, I am not the biggest lab whiz, but this is kind of some of the rule of thumb stuff that I do. And Fuang, it's amazing that you're listening. Interested if you're, from what you're asking me, it sounds like you're probably on the pro side. But yeah, I'd be interested. It's awesome. Hopefully that was some help to you. Cheers. Yeah. So Corey, I'll take this question right now. Let me go. Cerevus, I've not brewed with that strain. And I mean, it's making. He's asking about the Modelo strain. I think is Modelo now like the number. I think it's the number 1 import in the U.S. Pretty wild. I have heard. I've heard maybe some people talking about using that strain and liking it a lot. I'm not sure if that was the strain that Julian Trago was talking about using in their lagers. I could be wrong, but that's just some stuff kicking around the back of my head. But no, I don't have much experience with it. Corey Wayne, when you get to a point in this live stream, could you go over tips for hop water? I'm just going to be riffing on this one, man. So this answer might be disappointing, well, as they all might. I was asked to come up with a recipe to throw on tap, but my recent attempts have just had way too much bite. I'm only running it on our pilot system right now been putting 2.5 grams of hops per gallon of water. All right, so let's talk about why this can be tricky. First of all, I'm assuming you're going to want to drop your pH level at least to that of beer, right? So make sure you're getting under 4 or 5. I would potentially look at using like a lactic acid in that. That might be nice. And even if you're using maybe some phosphoric, but maybe lactic might help with a little bit of character. But then also you might need to push that lower too. So play around with pH as one of your variables. I have a buddy that's making hop water, and I need to talk to him more about it. But they are going through a brief boil, knocking out through the heat X. They are hitting it with some salts, with some brewing salts, or at least I think that's probably a good idea, because you do want to be mimicking the water profile of a beer. That's at least my gut on it. I could be wrong on that, but definitely make sure that you have those things in order. The drier and lighter a beer is, the less bitterness you need to balance it. And I would be really interested to see what doing a hop water that would essentially just be dry hopped would do, or at least like a late, I don't know, maybe just dry hopped. Okay. And then utilizing a product, maybe like a Tetra product on the backside. So you get that clear. I also have a buddy who's hitting it with yeast. So I believe he's getting hops into the fermenter and then hitting it with yeast, because he's talking about, he feels as if the yeast helps to complex the hop oils, and it becomes more, you get like more of like a, I don't know, like a beer type feel out of it. Anyways, that I could be talking out of the side of my head. But get your contact time, get your hop water separated from your dry hop, and then taste that and see if you need to dose like a little bit of like a Tetra product. That Tetra product would allow you to infuse bitterness directly into it. It would also help with foam stand, which I don't think that's something you're necessarily looking for, a foam with hop water. But I would back build it like that. So try to pull all your hops at least into very, very late. Don't even think about trying to generate bitterness. Do a small batch. Do a really small batch, however small you can, and just think about dry hopping it. Okay, and giving it a couple days of contact time, separating it, and tasting that, with your adjusted water. And then, but remember, if you dry hop, it's going to be pushing your pH back up again. So make sure you're getting under 4 or 5. And yeah, man, I don't know. You see a little bit of micro dosing of gold, or Tetra Gold, or Tetra Hop product. Yeah. See if you can bump that up, because that way you can adjust and play with it. Right. That would be my take on how to approach it. I appreciate the question. Yeah. Srivas mentions liquid aroma hops as well. Might be a good option. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good idea. Rob G, welcome, Rob G. I'm not sure if I've seen you in here before, but super happy to see you in here. The Brew Show has a great in-depth video about hop water. So yeah, dig into that. I've not checked it out. I probably need to. So yes. T Franks just stopped in to say you the man, Adam. Cheers. T Franks, I appreciate it, man. T Frakes, I'm sorry. I appreciate it. I've seen your name around for a long time. Yeah. Yeah, maybe just take the hot side out of it. You know what I mean? As far as that hop water goes, Corey. Yeah, give it a shot and let me know what you think. Scott T, welcome. As far as the hop water thing, he said he's done a 6-count batch of hop water and it's pretty tasty. A 1-ounce dip hop and 2 ounces steeped at 170 F. Additionally, I used LA3 yeast. So yeah, man, check it out. Check it out. Check it out. Good to see all these new faces in here, new names in here. Bro, we got Tiny Rick back in the house. I don't know why, but listen, there's a lot of great screen names out there. But Tiny Rick, though, Tiny Rick, you've captured my heart with that one. I don't know why. I don't even know what I'm picturing when I think of Tiny Rick, but it is what it is. Tiny Rick out there in the streets, man. Hey, Adam, outside of high-end de-alkalizing equipment, do you think it's possible to create quality NA beer? You know, it's a good question because just about everybody that I know that's doing it, they're big boys. So like, I mean, obviously I'm not just talking like Bud Miller Coors, but we're talking about like the large contract brewing places. Big breweries are doing this. New Realm's doing it. They're a big brewery. This is typically not a mom and pop thing. You know, we're going to be digging into this question, Tiny Rick, a little bit more through 2024. I'm working on securing Richard Price, or not Priest, but I believe it's Price from Escarpment Labs to talk NA yeast. There are yeast. There are fermenting yeasting options for doing this stuff, and I have to dig into it more. If anything, this reminds me to hit up Richard about this. But you know, the big problems that we're looking at is from a food safety standpoint. You know, pH, shelf stability. A lot of times people are really driving the pH of those beers low. But there are some options, and it might be good. You know, the flip side is you know, you might be able to buy a half barrel of a pretty solid product and just put it on at your place. If it's a pub situation. Bell's is making one in Michigan. Tiny Rick, newsflash. In Michigan, Bell's is about the only one able to do it currently. But state legislation doesn't allow micro to purchase from other licenses. You're from Michigan, dude? I'm from Michigan. Did you know that, Tiny Rick? Have you ever met me in real life? That'd be cool if we met in real life. Yeah. Okay, so the escarpment stuff calls for pasteurization before or full. We know each other? Oh, man. This is driving me crazy now. Oh, what's up, brother? How's it going, dude? Yeah, man. So, yeah, specifically that. Okay, so Michigan man. I didn't know Bell's was getting into that. So yeah, you can't, dude, that's crazy. I forgot that we had bonkers rules in that state. I forgot how bad some of those rules can be. I mean, yeah, play around with it, TR Tiny Rick. Go small scale, but I'm gonna try to let me see what I can do with and hook up an interview with Richard, and then let me know like if you have any deep dive questions on it. Get those to me, and I'll make sure to feed those through because I think he said he was down to do a podcast. We just need to set up a date now. So yeah. Thanks for the question, Tiny Rick. I do love that though. All right, coffee sip, or are we sparkling water? All right. Oh, I still have Tyrex's question up there. Hide. All right. All right. Next question is from Chris on YouTube. Lots of fruited sour IPA on the East Coast, finished with tons of residual sugar in the beer, but without can explosion. So this is a question coming off a series that I did, or a fruit beer series, or something I did on fruit beer, or fruit beer brew day. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, full brew days, baby. They're in there, tutorials, all that stuff. Jump into the playlist if you have not on YouTube. So he knows that people are making fruited beers that are canned without explosion. And those brewers claim it's because their beers are fully attenuated, which is not true. Yeah, you're right. That's not true, more than likely. My question is it a legal issue admitting adding preservative to deactivate yeast? Or those brewers just find themselves losing faces with that process? Yeah, I mean, my guess is that there is some sort of stabilizer that's used, whether it be like a sulfite. Is that the one? Sulfite, not sulfate. Sulfite. I think it's sulfite. You can correct me in the chat. It's one of those two. Some preservatives, something to knock that yeast out. That's my guess. Maybe something like a sorbate of some sort. But you can go to you can jump on your BSG website, or and any supplier, and look at beer stabilization, and you can find those things and dosing rates. A lot of people don't like to use them, but sometimes you're in a situation where you kind of need to. Srivas says potassium metabisulfate, I know, is one, or sorbate. Yeah. Thank you, Srivas. And yeah, I mean, the reality is if you have if you've not knocked out that yeast, and you're putting puree in there, like there's places floating around there putting 47% puree in their beer. They're making like a super acid beer and then just blending it up with smoothies, and with fruit smoothie, and calling it a thing. You need to balance it. You need to stabilize those beers. They're probably doing it not labeled, unless they're doing some sort of sterile filtration or something like that, where they're completely removing all the yeast and then mixing and getting that on the backside. But even then, to think that your fruit, even your stuff that you're relying on being stable, just planning on all those things being stable, and it's a big roll of the dice. It's a big roll of the dice. So yeah, that's my take on it, Chris. If they're slamming out some smoothie things, and it's a sugar bomb, it's a diabetes beer, my guess is they have to have taken out that yeast, and it should be labeled if they are doing that. Next question is from Bakhav Brew on Instagram. Do you this came in on an Instagram story, ladies and gentlemen. Do you miss a step mash at times on your setup? And how do you raise temp at mash out? So everybody's system is different. The super majority of my career, I brewed on a system where I had a mash / lauter ton. So I had my lauter rakes and my false bottom, and I would just mash in there. I get my foundation water above the mash screen, the false bottom, and then I would start mashing in there. Now I'm working on a system that has a mash ton and a separate lauter ton. So have we ever missed that? Everything is automated on most everything is automated on the brew house at Sonder that I brew on now. So there will be times where there might be a glitch with the programming, or with the variances that are built into the program, and maybe I'll stall on a step for too long or something like that. I don't think I've ever had it completely miss or skip a step. And then I how I change my mash temperature right now, because we do step mashes, that's done through steam jackets through the side. So there are, on our mash tun, which is tall and narrow, there's 2 blades at the bottom that are very close to the bottom of the tank. And then there's mixing arms, 2 rows of mixing arms that go up from there. And that, mixes it. And so as we're steaming, as we're adding steam to those jackets, we're mixing it so we're not scorching anything. And that's how we raise up to mash out. If you're doing a single infusion setup, like with a mash/louder tun situation, what you would have to do is you would have to work out your water volumes, okay? And you would have to mash in thicker, which means more grain compared to water, and then conduct your rest at whatever temperature, and then potentially infuse volumes of boiling water as you're mixing that tank to raise it up to the next state. But the reason why I'm saying boiling, which you might have some issues, are very hot water, because you're going to quickly get into a situation where you have to add so much water because the temperature difference isn't great enough, that you can be getting to a point where you have more water than you want. You're unbalanced with your water to grist ratio. That can be a tough thing too. So just some things to think about as far as that go. But with my particular system that I brew on now, that is what I do, and that's how it works. So appreciate the question, Bakav Brew. Yeah, distro from state to state is crazy. And Tiny Rick wants to know another question out. What percentage puree is it not considered beer anymore? It's a good question. I'm wondering if it's over 50, because some of the places that I know that are smoothie bomb places, I don't think they go over that, but maybe they do. That's a good question. Sreves Nunez mentions, if you can ferment Mountain Dew, I wouldn't trust stabilizers too much. Fermenting Mountain Dew is wild. I'll never forget the day that poor Matt Brandel went over the edge playing Risk and had one too many Mountain Dews as we were celebrating our graduation. We were good kids. Next question comes from Richie on Instagram. Hey, Adam, I hope you don't mind me contacting you for a quick question. Well, of course not, Richie. Anytime, dude. I should probably wait for a Q&A, but I'm too impatient. Anyways, I've been brewing for 5 years now, and I still love the hobby. But a few years ago, I tasted a single hop IPA made with Nelson Sauvin. To date, it's the best beer I've ever had. I've been trying to replicate it. In fact, I actually hassled the head brewer, and he gave me the recipe. I tried multiple times to recreate it, but always get the same onion garlic taste when making it. Dry hopping, I think, with Nelson Sauvin. Do you have any idea what is causing that flavor? This is going to sound sassy, but we're going to talk about it more. It's probably the batch of Nelson Sauvin that you have. The crop year, the way it was handled, when it was picked. The interesting thing is this West Coast IPA, we had some 2021 Strata floating around, and we had a pile of that. And Austin and I talked to Chase about doing a West Coast beer, and we're like, hey, well, listen, we can run the Strata at it, right? And I was like, man, I hope it's still good. So I hit up some of my buddies that use a lot more American hops than I do. And I'm like, hey, man, what do you think about me throwing some 2021 Strata in this? And they're like, well, it's probably better than the crop year we're using right now, when they were using something fresher. So, it really does come down to the crop year, what you actually have in the package there. Because sometimes you get some great crop years, some great fields, some great hills that just they're picked at just the right time. So sometimes it can be the hop itself. Now, I would also potentially look at diminishing your contact time, especially with some of those New Zealand hops, and see if that gets you more in the range of what you're looking for. Because as those hops tend to stay on, if they are going to be pulling out that onion garlic character, that is probably going to happen more with an extended period of time left on the green matter. So something else to figure out. And then also one other thing, keep chasing it. All right, and this isn't to to try to discourage you. Keep chasing that beer, because I think that's one of the awesome things about having brewing as a hobby or as a job or as a passion. But also maybe when we think about like the best beers we've ever had, sometimes it's the situation and it's the people too. Like it's the whole experience, right? So, and this is a completely like non-brewing thing. Think back about what it was. Think about what you're doing, the people you were with, and like what that time was. And maybe like there's something you can pull out of it to be grateful for. Because I think a lot of times it's multiple components that make that perfect beer, and it's not always the liquid in the glass. So anyway, it's going a little philosophical there at the end, ladies and gentlemen. Richie may not want to hear that at all, but brother Richie, that's what I got for you. Hope you got some value out of that. I like this question. Next question is from Corey. Something that I ran into while getting into the commercial industry a little over a year ago as the brewer. How do you navigate relationships with other breweries in your local guild? The checklist is this, man. It is, you are friendly, helpful, and positive. Friendly, helpful, and positive. Make your depending on like from a networking standpoint, go to the events. It's really strange. I am an extreme extrovert, but I'm gonna go to a thing tomorrow, like for Ohio Craft Brewers Legislative Day, and I'm gonna really have to try to talk to and meet people. I don't know why. And I'm like an extreme extrovert, but certain situations are challenging for me. But you have to network effectively, right? Go to stuff, meet people, ask for help, try to do collabs. And I would always approach it as, and this really is the spirit that I take to it, but I think it's probably the right one. This is what I feel genuinely. I want to get into somebody else's brewery and brew with them. Like, so I can like just talk and learn from them. Never like question what they're doing. Just like to say, I want to be a sponge, right? Like, let's just talk this out. And like, just even through conversations, you can kind of figure out who those brewers are just conversationally, and then really pursue relationships with those people, because that might be some of your first easy foot in the door stuff. As you're doing that stuff, and I don't want to sound preachy, and I don't want to sound like, like your old man trying to tell you what to do, but do watch the volume of drinking that you're doing, because first of all, it's not good for you. Second of all, you're going to remember more and you're going to be able to make better connections with people. You know what I mean? So like, focus on drinking professionally, and I'm not preaching. If you already do it, that's great. But sometimes we all need reminders on that. Try to drink professionally when you're in those settings, and talk to the people that are in leadership and ask to be helpful. And it doesn't even have to be like with a board position, but just say, hey, I'd love to help with something in my area or something. If you can travel, do that too. But yeah, make yourself available, introduce yourself, and be friendly, grateful, and helpful. And I think you'll do well. I think you'll do well. So, and I think maybe you might be, I don't know. Did you say you're a Carolina boy? Anyways, I got a couple boys brewing over there in North Carolina. Srivas is running through that brew day, man. He's working on his salts as we speak. The IPA brew day begins for Srivas. Srivas, where are you from again? Where are you brewing out of? Give me a holla. All right. Okay, so that's actually it for my traditional questions. So now, like, this is how do I want to say it? This is pro brewer focus. This is ask your friendly pro brewer. This is I don't know. This is it's maybe it's not a segment, maybe it is, but these aren't questions. This is some of the stuff. This is from some of the, because I've been on my grind, baby. I've been on my grind. I tell you guys to, ladies and gents, I say, listen to podcasts one way on your commute, not even both ways. So I've been trying to take my own medicine. Physician, heal thyself. All right. That's what I've been trying to do. And so I've been listening to podcasts. So here are a few things. So I've got a few nuggets that I pulled out of episode 352 of the Beer and Brewing podcast. And this one, they interviewed Chris Loring of Notch Brewing. And they did a little bit of a deep dive on traditional lager brewing and the production of diacetyl. And in this episode, they talk about brewing Czech style lager. And he was saying that because he was formerly trained in the Czech Republic, he was saying that these Czech lagers should have character and they should be expressive. And not everything is just a crispy boy, right? Like not everything, goes super dry and is, super clean, right? And he said, so anyways, that was kind of his take on some of that stuff. And it's really worth a listen. And so they were talking about diacetyl production and using traditional lagering tanks. Okay, so we're not looking at a scenario where we're passing VDK in a tank under normal conditions and then transferring to a lagering tank. They'll say it's pretty standard practice to be transferring a fermenting beer with one or more Plato to go into a lagering tank where it will be there for a while. And if the cell count isn't high enough to be able to deal with all of the diacetyl, or maybe not even deal with all the precursor, issues can come up. So let me read what I have typed out here. It says they were talking about when brewing with traditional lagering practices, where a brewer may move a fermenting beer into a horizontal tank with 1 degree Plato left in fermentation. The diacetyl precursor, known as acetolactate, and that precursor isn't that acetolactate is not something that can be smelled or tasted unless it is oxidized. ... Pregnant pause. So it can be there in your beer and you don't know it until packaging, right? Because it's not going to manifest on the cold side, but at packaging, it can manifest itself because of O2 pickup. So you can actually have a diacetyl-free beer going into package, but then it will develop diacetyl over time as that acetolactate oxidizes. That yeast would normally take care of the precursor if you leave the beer with sufficient yeast count to let it mature. However, if you are using some traditional methods of a long-term lagering tank, you can run into this issue. So really fascinating stuff. You might say, well, then if you're running all those, those risks, why do you want to go into long-term storage tanks, potentially lagering up to months? The research suggests that there actually are chemical compound differences between those beers and beers that aren't long lagered like that. There's a great technical quarterly article that I wrote about, and they're still working out ways of like actually measuring those things. But anyways, there's some cool research happening out there. And yeah, I would definitely recommend you checking out this episode 352, where they talk Czech lager. This is just one of the nuggets that I enjoyed off of that concept of something I didn't realize, that you can have that precursor, acetolactate, in the beer. It won't manifest itself until after packaging because of the DO that is picked up through packaging. That was an eye-opener for me. So shout out to Beer and Brewing Podcast, great podcast, Chris Loring, and Notch Brewing. So much love to all those people, and check that spot out if you can. Jay Spees, Channel All-Star. Jay Spees. Hey, Adam, we are looking at a glycol chiller for our system. What are your thoughts on single-stage systems versus dual compressor systems, leaning toward dual compressor for reliability? Well, Jay, I am not. This is an area that I would actually like to get. I would like to get better in, and I might be able to do like a little bit of research to form my own opinion on it. But I do want to throw this at you, and it was one takeaway that I got, I believe, from my interview with Julian Schrago. I can't give you a hard and fast answer on the single or dual compressor system because it's not an area of expertise for me. But I can say this: I would, if you haven't considered it, I would look at doing a longer cold crash on your beers. And I don't know what you're planning on doing or what you're doing if you did get your spot open yet. I don't think you're open yet. But I feel like if you do, rather than going from fermentation temperature down to 0 in 12 hours, if you spread that out over 36 to 48 hours, I know from that interview with Julian Schrago, you can get a lot more out of your chiller, and you'll be putting a lot less load on it, and it'll be a lot easier for it to handle. And apparently there's some data out there that suggests that crashing more slowly like that is actually beneficial for the yeast, as long as that yeast crop that you have in there is really nice and healthy. But really at that point, most of the stuff in the bottom of the tank should potentially be shaved off or harvested or dumped. But yeah, that's kind of a conversation for another day. But if you're not planning on a more gradual stepped crash, maybe look at it, because that can have a benefit for your chiller, for not taxing your chiller too much. So Revis, you're brewing out of Hong Kong, man. That's wild. I would, that's crazy. I need to get out to Hong Kong and brew. We can do a collab, man. Send me out there. Revis, send me to Hong Kong. Thanks for the question, Jay. Yeah, man, Jay, consider that if that's, because we are doing that at Sonder rather than just a hard crash. But that stuff's all programmed in. So unless everything's all programmed in, you have to do it manually. But yeah, consider that, because it won't rough up your chiller as much. So anyways, hey, and Jay, let me know. I'm excited for you, man. I don't know if you've done it before, but you might as well. I'll say it out loud on the podcast. So let me know the brewery and brewery name and location, because I know you're planning, if you're comfortable doing that. And we'll keep us up to date, and we'll keep letting everybody know how you guys are doing. And if there's anybody out in your area, we'll tell them to go support you. Next topic comes from again episode 352 of the Beer and Brewing Podcast, where they interviewed Chris Loring of Notch Brewing. This is from a kind of like a little mini series that I'm doing where I'm trying to stay on top of my own research, listen to some new stuff, and this is just some nuggets, some little takeaways that I wanted to pass along. So Chris in this episode, he talks about getting the most out of your step mashes and decoction by way of using a couple of tools. He said he likes to use some crystal or caramalt's low Lovibond in his grist at low percentages, around 3%. He said in particular, when he feels as if he uses these malts with decoctions, that he gets a really nice fullness, a really nice character in the finished beer. And then the other thing that he said that I love is he goes, because he's giving all these little tips and tricks, and you need to listen to the whole episode because there is a lot of them. But he said, nothing's a magic bullet, you know, with your brewing. And I remember when I thought, oh, well, all right, I'm dialing in my water chemistry. Here's the magic bullet. I'm cell counting. Here's the magic bullet. Oh, I hop selected. This is the magic bullet. It's 30 different things, right? And that's part of what keeps it. That's part of what keeps it fun. There's always something to chase. Don't let it frustrate you. Just know that there's always going to be something to chase. There's no magic bullet. It's not decoction. It's not grist tricks. It's 30 things. He does say that he feels as if smaller beers, and he's talking specifically like Czech lager, smaller beers like 10 Plato beers, benefit from lower percentages of character malt. Bigger beers, so like 14 degree beers, do not necessarily need that. You can get away with just a base malt decocted. He also feels as if you need more expressive lager strains when you're decocting. And this is, again, he's coming through this lens of making expressive Czech lager. But he said so often we get caught up on making these incredibly clean beers. But he said pair some of these decoction processes with a more expressive yeast, which one was interesting. And I don't know if he said Harvest or the Augustiner strain, but that's what he was referencing. Harvest is one of them. I love that strain. Harvest is what it's called with Imperial as an expressive lager strain. I'm just a huge fan of it. And he said, push beyond just that idea of using ultra clean 3470, right? He said that world of lager is actually far broader. There's a time and place for that crispy boy, for that dry, ultra clean. But he said there's other beautiful lager yeasts and different techniques that can be utilized to make a very nice, complex beer. But yeah. Anyways. Yes, Reeves, that's the way it goes, man. It's always budget. I hear you. I know how that is. I know how that is. Maybe someday I'll take Adam Makes Beer on the road, and I'll go around the country, the world, brewing in different people's places. That wouldn't be that bad. Yeah. Jay Spees, his Auger Brewing out of York, PA. That's right. It was York, PA. Let me know if you got a timeline, man. Tiny Rick wants to know, how do I feel about fermentation under pressure? I just had a great interview. It's probably the most watched overall podcast as far as the YouTube stream and as far as uploads on Spotify and podcast. My interview with John Palmer. He has a take on fermentation under pressure. He's not a huge fan of it. Jay, aiming for this fall. Bless you guys, man. Hopefully things go well for you. It's a marathon, man. Stay strong. Many have done it before you, and you will get there. So we're rooting for you. But back to Tiny Rick and pressure fermentations. Some of the downside, especially when you're brewing on the pro side, it can be rough on your yeast. So if you're looking at trying to harvest yeast and reuse, you could have some issues on that side. And yeast is such an expensive component of beer that could be prohibitive. But you can make cleaner beers at higher temps. but I think it's a tool for the tool belt. There's some folks that are maybe they're ripping it like that all the time and they love it. But yeah. But check out that interview with Palmer, and I even have a specific question, or even a breakdown video. Palmer weighing in on pressure fermentation. So check that out to get his take too, because it's a good one. Yeah, Jay, man, and I say with all honesty, like one of the more touching things that's happened to me when I was brewing professionally was we had, and I probably told the story before, but I absolutely love it, and I have a soft spot for the guy. But Das Goggins, who helps to run the U.S. Open Beer Championship, he came by Cartridge one year to award us with the medals that we had won. And he came in and he saw all the bridge construction and the bike trail shut down. And he just walked in and hugged me. And he said, "I'm so sorry. I can't imagine what this is doing to the business." Because he's been a business owner before. I've not been a business owner before, but I know it's a grind, man. But you can do it. You can do it. Take care of yourself, get good sleep, take care of your body, be good to your people, and keep grinding. You'll get there, man. You'll get there. So anyways, I'm excited for you. But yeah. I don't know if I wrapped that question on the expressive yeast strain, but yeah, I think that was it from that nugget. From that nugget. Yeah, and Jay, if you're ever and all of you, if you're ever in the Cincinnati area, hit me up if my schedule allows. I'd love to show you the brewery and whatnot. So yeah, we got Kings Island down here, baby. You know what I mean? So get down here and I'll show you some beer stuff. Next one. It comes from episode 352 of the Beer and Brewing Podcast, where they interviewed Chris Loring of Notch Brewing. Also, thank you for all the live listeners, podcast listeners, as I kind of repeat some of these because, they do get clipped. So I appreciate your patience with my intros. They interviewed Chris Loring of Notch Brewing. He discusses in this podcast making darker lagers, dark Czech lager, and notes that he never puts his roasted malts in the mash, but rather the lauter for these beers. And they never decoct the mash that has roast malt in it. Interesting. So sometimes you might hear some of these things talked about. Sometimes you hear about capping your mash. I remember back in the homebrew days, I heard of conducting your mash and then like on the batch sparge or whatever, like, sprinkling the dark malt over the top, maybe as you recirculate or what have you, right? Some things you can do after getting conversion with your mash. And he's utilizing this. Now, there's two differences. So he has a mash tun and a lauter tun. Some people have a mash / lauter tun. So he's saying that he never mashes in those roasted malts because when he's making those darker lagers, he's not using dehusked. He is using husked roasted malts. But he will wait until he gets to sparge, and so he'll cap that lauter bed with the dark malt and then sparge on top of that. And that'll help to reduce not going through that full mashing process. Will help reduce that tannin extraction. You'll still get some light flavor and you'll still get some color, but you won't be pulling those harsh tannins out, especially if you're pulling a decoction and you're pulling like a roasted malt that you put in the mash into the kettle and boiling that can really amp up that tannic bitter harshness that you can pull from those. So that was one thing that I loved out of that. It was kind of just a little snippet, but I thought it was a cool one. And even if you're not in a situation where you're making those beers, that's just all good stuff to store away in the back of your mind. So you should check out episode 352 with Chris Loring of Notch Brewing. Great stuff. I would love to try some of those beers. Yeah, let me know if you're out there and you've had those beers and what you think about them. It sounds like they have some really cool traditional stuff going on there. Next, oh wait, hold on a second. Yeah, Jay, in relation to that, you say it seems to be the philosophy of when we were talking about using small percentage, between doing the smaller beer and the bigger beer. Yeah, I can see that. Next one we're gonna look at is actually taken from episode 348 of the Beer and Brewing Podcast. If you have not listened to that podcast, lots of good stuff. And this is part of me trying to hold myself accountable. I always call people out, or encourage people, I should say, to, we're in charge of our own professional development as brewers. So take half of your commute and give it to some quality podcasts. So anyhow, I've been taking some of my own medicine this past month. And I really enjoyed episode 348 of Beer and Brewing Podcast, where they interviewed Chris White, Julian Schrago, and Garrison Frattoni of Russian River. And they were discussing zinc levels in the ferment. So if you've not been hearing what some people are talking about as far as zinc, they're talking about using potentially elevated levels of zinc and taking their zinc additions off of the hot side from the kettle and moving it to the cold side. Reason being is the amount of zinc that you can be adding to your kettle, you can be losing potentially up to 60% of it, because it will bind with the proteins in the kettle and actually drop to the bottom and not actually make it to the cold side to your yeast. So what is a potential solution to that? A potential solution to that is getting actually zinc salt, or, like the powdered zinc salt product, whatever it is. I don't remember the thing off the top of my head, but they talk about it in this episode. And adding it directly to the cold side. All right. So you know exactly what you're getting in. You don't have to guesstimate on what's being taken up with the trub and the various beers that you're making, which I like quite a bit. And they were talking about making a sterile solution. So if you have an Instapot or a pressure cooker or an autoclave, making up a zinc solution in an autoclavable bottle and then dosing that out. Some people are doing it as simple as having a valve on the side of the tank, putting a sanitized elbow on it, opening it up, and as they're filling, pouring that in, and then just closing the valve and going on your way. But I believe it was Julian that was saying that they're assuming 100 parts per billion just from the base malt that they're using, from the base malt, or a 0.1 ppm range, just from the base malt. So he was saying, very roughly speaking, they're adding 1 gram of zinc in solution for every 10 barrels of wort produced. They're making sure that is getting mixed. You just don't want to top it through the top of the fermenter once it's full. You actually want to start transferring that wort in. Either do it through the side port, go up top, pop the top off, pour it in as it's being mixed, because you actually want that action, that mixing action, to be able to be in contact with the yeast. So 1 gram in solution for every 10 barrels of wort produced. So that can be a good rule of thumb. And when they do that, they're getting between 250 to 300 parts per billion, or 0.25 to 0.3 parts per million. And that's kind of a sweet spot. You can kind of dial that in up and down. If you go too high, what you can find is that slurry is really going to brick out on you and turn into clay. That's not what you want. Some other things that you might notice. You might notice some differences in ester expression when you do this. So keep an eye on that, maybe to the good or to the bad. But you should see higher viability, potentially a more robust crop off the bottom of that. So some cool stuff. And some people talk about getting 24 to 48 hours faster ferments. So from a production standpoint, definitely worth it. So worth it to check out. So anyways, great episode 348 Beer and Brewing Podcast. That's just one small nugget from it. You're going to want to check that out. Okay, I'm going to read this question and I'm going to see if I can be helpful here. Hey, Ed, this is from Wevdan. Not seeing you in here before. Welcome. Wevdan. Hey, Adam. Our current setup in the brew house is that when doing Vorloff, so when recirculating the mash, the exit of the return pipe has a small horizontal plate so that wort creates a small dome prior to hitting the surface of the grain bed. So yeah, I've seen it where the pipe comes down and then it hits. It's either a plate, so it like makes a dome and sprays back down, or I've seen it look like a little dentist mirror where it hits and kind of fans out. Yes. We usually Verloff for 20. Let me make sure. Yeah. So it recirculates and hits the surface of the grain bed, assuming one regulates the pump flow accordingly. Yep. We usually Verloff for 20 to 30 minutes and notice at the end that there's some foam on the top. Should I be worried that I'm killing my beer foam? How to best approach this? He also says foam differs depending on beer style. We have been chasing better foam overall. Yeah, I mean, you want gentle process. I wouldn't be super concerned about it on that side. There might be some hot side aeration bros that want to get in my biz. But I do know, and this is anecdotal, I do know of some larger scale breweries that have the means of being able to purge tanks with a neutral gas or not. It's not. It wouldn't be neutral. Well, like CO2 or nitrogen or something like that. And they did not find, and the capacity to test for it, they didn't find extended shelf life on packaged product when they had been flushing hot side vessels. I think that you might see different levels of foam being generated based on the grist. So some grist that you're using may be more foam positive, and I've seen that myself. You do want to be, as gentle as possible, but you definitely want to turn over the volume of that liquid in your lauter ton too, right, during your Verloff. So, yeah, I mean, you could experiment with something like that, but I think you don't really need to. I would say where you really want to be focusing in is all of your cold side practices. I don't know if you have the capacity to measure DO to measure oxygen in your bright tanks, but really buckle down on your transfer procedures, connection points, whether you're taking beer from one vessel to another, making sure you're purging those little areas between your CO2, either with beer, with gas, or even when you're hooking up your gas source to your CO2 arm, or to your carbonation stone. You know what I mean? There's all little areas there. And then making sure you do gentle transfers. Okay, don't be ripping your beer through there. Also try to capture as much CO2 as you can on the fermentation side, right? So that's another option too. The less you have to be injecting gas into that beer, the better. I think that would be far more. I think those things play a much larger role than that recirc, than your Verloff. So yeah, but it makes sense that you'd be concerned about it. But yeah, I think you're going to be all right as long as your downstream practices are tight. So I appreciate the question. All right, everybody. Well, listen, I'm going to wrap up a little shorter than usual. It's been, like I said, things have been really good. I've got a lot of family stuff going on this month. Your boy's going to be doing, I don't know if I'm going to be crying. I'm definitely going to be laughing. I always laugh. My family makes me laugh. My friends make me laugh. I'm going to be laughing. But I've got my oldest son graduating college. I've got my next oldest coming back. My daughter is just coming back from a trip. She did a bunch of fundraising for her junior senior trip. They were in Ireland and Scotland, and I don't know, man. Life's a beautiful thing, and my family is amazing, and there's been some stuff going on lately, so it's just been I don't know. It's been good, but it was really nice sitting down and talking to you all tonight. Sometimes it's a little stressful coming into it, and this time I just kind of just let it be, and it was really enjoyable getting together with you and talking beers. Cheers to everybody in the chat. It was fun that you could make it out. It was nice to see maybe what I think have been some lurkers popping up and asking some questions in here. It's good to see. It's good to see some new names because I see the number of people watching, but I don't see like a list of names. So yeah, it's always cool. Make sure you're dropping your questions to me in the chat. Yeah, should be I don't know. I just got a message about my daughter. Her flight's coming in. Anyways, take care, you guys. Be good to your people. Check out Blickman, and support our sponsors, and track me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Hit all your notifications. Bondi, what's up, brother? Adzi, you cheeky bugger. Finishing early. Hey, you know me. It happens to the best of us. All right, everybody. Have a good one. I'll see you next time. Bye.